Chapter 22. It was early evening on a rainy day in May. The Stoltzes had eaten their evening meal of potatoes and cabbage and bread, since meat was hard to come by these days, and now they were sitting by their radio with the sound very low. German troops had driven westward on May 10, 1940. They had taken Holland without much difficulty, and they were slicing through Belgium with terrifying ease. Nazi broadcasts reported the victories in glorious rhetoric that left the impression that few, if any, German soldiers were meeting death in the campaign. The Stoltzes knew, however, that they could learn more by listening to the BBC reports, which were broadcast across the continent in German. By law, Germans couldn't listen, and doing so was dangerous, but Anna had the impression that many people did. Then a knock, hard and persistent, came at the door. Anna was instantly frightened, and she saw the same fear in her father's face. She knew of no one coming to visit, and this was not the knock of a friend. Brother Stoltz turned off the radio. "Stay here, I'll go to the door," he said, and already the knocking had begun again. Sister Stoltz let her husband go, but she and Anna held the kitchen door open and watched. Brother Stoltz opened the door, only a crack, but a loud voice announced, "I must come in," and a man pushed his way into the room. Anna saw the long black leather coat. Gestapo. "I must speak with your daughter," the agent said. He glanced around, and then he spotted Anna and her mother in the kitchen doorway. "My daughter? Why would you want to see her?" Brother Stoltz asked. This was not a good tone to take with the Gestapo, and so Anna stepped into the room. She felt the man's eyes on her body as he studied her up and down. "My goodness," the officer said. "No wonder your American friends liked what they saw here." "What do you want?" Brother Stoltz demanded to know. Anna stepped to her father's side and took his arm. She wanted him to be calm and careful. "We know about your many meetings with foreigners, Herr Stoltz. We are very concerned when we see these things happen." "Who are you?" "Oh, excuse me, have I been rude? I am Agent Kellermann, Gestapo." The man was wearing no uniform, but every German knew the coats. "We are aware that your daughter writes letters to America. Isn't that so?" "Yes," Anna said. "I have friends in America." "And what do you tell them, young lady? Do you tell them about conditions here? Do you spread lies?" "No, I don't." "And how can we be sure of that?" He reached inside his coat pocket and pulled out several letters, all in airmail envelopes. They had been opened. "I didn't know there was a law against writing letters to America," Anna said. Sister Stoltz stepped close to Anna and put her arm around her waist. "A law against writing to America? Certainly not. But we are at war." His voice had risen, his heavy face filling with color. "Americans help our enemies make war against us. How can it be good for you to communicate with such people?" The young men she wrote to were missionaries. Young man. One young man. A young man who defied the Führer, who refused to salute our flag. "I assure you," Brother Stoltz said, "he is a fine young man with a great love for the German people. And, I assume, this fine young man had great love for this German girl." He eyed Anna up and down again. "Did you give him favors to make him love the German people so much?" "Herr Kellermann," Brother Stoltz said, calmly but with a hushed intensity in his voice, "I must ask you to leave now. My daughter will write no more letters to America." Kellermann stepped closer to Brother Stoltz. "I will decide when to leave. If you make a whore of your daughter, that is up to you, but don't think you can insult me without reprisal." Anna grabbed her father's arm, tried to stop him as he stepped forward, but it was already too late. "You are a pig," he said. "You will not speak this way about my daughter." "And what will you do to stop me?" Herr Kellermann pulled his nightstick from his belt. Brother Stoltz was shaking with anger. Anna tightened her grip. "It's all right," she whispered. "Let this go." But Brother Stoltz said, "You have no right to come into our home and speak to us this way. Even Hitler would not grant you this right." "Now you have said too much. You will come with me." Kellermann stepped forward and grabbed Brother Stoltz by the arm. "No, please," Sister Stoltz said. "This is all a misunderstanding." "You stay back, Frau Stoltz. And you, come with me now." Kellermann pulled at Brother Stoltz's arm. "I have no intention to go with you. I have only said—" Suddenly the nightstick flashed, striking Brother Stoltz across the right shoulder. He dropped to his knees and cried out in pain, and then fell forward and rolled onto his side. Sister Stoltz knelt next to her husband. "Oh, Heinrich," she cried. Somewhere in the background, Peter was pleading, "Don't hurt him any more. Please don't hurt him." "All of you move back, instantly," Kellermann demanded. And then he grabbed Brother Stoltz by the elbow and jerked. Brother Stoltz let out another cry of agony, and then he clambered to his feet. Anna saw how white his face was, the sweat collecting on his forehead. Now, Herr Stolz, you will walk quietly from this room, and the rest of you will stay back." He pushed Brother Stolz, who stumbled forward and then managed to walk out the door. Sister Stolz was still on the floor, bent over. Anna and Peter knelt next to her, and all three gripped each other. For maybe half a minute they clung to each other and said nothing, but Sister Stolz had begun to cry out loud, the sobs wrenching from deep within her. "He'll tell them he's not a traitor," Peter said. "It will be all right." But Anna said nothing. She didn't doubt for a second that Kellerman would carry out his threats. But her mother stopped crying, seemed to gather her strength for a moment, and got to her feet. "I know someone. I will talk to Herr Schlenker. He's with the Gestapo, a high officer, but I've known him all my life. He's not like this Kellerman." She hurried into her bedroom and then came back with her raincoat. "I'll go now," she said. "I'll see what I can do. Pray for me, and pray for Papa. I must hurry," and she left. Brother Stolz was sitting on a wooden chair in the center of a little room. He was so full of pain that he could hardly think, the horrible ache running down his arm and side and up his neck right into his brain. Kellerman was standing in front of him, and on each side were other men, dressed in civilian clothes. "Herr Stolz," Kellerman said, "you have already made it clear that you have no loyalty to the Führer. If you want to save your family, you must admit to this." "It's not so," Brother Stolz said. "We have done nothing wrong." Suddenly he felt a blow in the side of his head. The impact sent flashes of light through his brain and sent him sprawling on the stone floor. Pain exploded everywhere. He tried to curl up and hang on, but two of the officers grabbed him by the elbows and hoisted him back onto the chair. "Please don't, please," Brother Stolz was saying between breaths. "Simply tell us the truth," Kellerman said, his face close to Brother Stolz's. "I cannot save you now, but I can save your family. Simply admit what you have done." Suddenly Kellerman struck him across the face, maybe with the nightstick, maybe with his fist. Brother Stolz only felt the smashing pain, felt himself falling backwards. His next awareness was of water splashing in his face, and he was coughing, choking. He felt his arms jerk, both at the same time, and then he was slammed back into the chair. But he also felt a kind of calmness coming over him. The pain was turning to numbness, and he knew he had passed the point of caring about that. "Did you try to send secrets to these Americans? Simply say yes, and this will end. If you continue on this way, we will go after your family." "Lord, help me," Brother Stolz kept repeating, but he said nothing out loud. "Give me strength. Please protect my family." Suddenly something struck him across his knee, sending a new pain shooting through his leg. This fresh agony was almost too much. "Please, let me die, Lord," he prayed. He was sinking into unconsciousness when water struck his face again. "It's sad to see that a man cares nothing about his family," Herr Kellerman was saying. "There are things we can do to them. Is that what you want?" Brother Stolz didn't answer. What he wanted to do was to strike this man just once before he died. But he couldn't move. "Simply say yes. Simply admit you are a traitor, and this is finished. Otherwise, we will go get your daughter, and we'll have our pleasure with her right here before your eyes." Brother Stolz took a long breath, and then he said with the last of his strength, "You will answer to God for this." Another pain struck him, somewhere. It was all jumbled now, and he felt himself slipping away, but he was relieved that the end had come. The next time he felt anything, something cold but soft was on his face, and someone was speaking. "Can you hear me?" It was a man's voice, but not Kellerman's. Brother Stolz had no interest in answering. This only meant more agony, not death. "I have called for an ambulance. I'm bringing help," the man said. "Hold on for now." Brother Stolz was not sure whether he was in the same place. He forced his eyes open and saw a blurry face. "Your wife came to me," the face said. "She told me what was happening. Kellerman had no right to do this to you. I know the kind of man you are. If someone had insulted my daughter this way, I would have reacted the same way." From somewhere in the room came the hollow voice of Kellerman, subdued now. "He denounced the Führer. I will not put up with that." "I know what he said," the man said, the one close to Brother Stolz, and somewhere in the confusion it had become the voice of Herr Schlenker, the Stolz's neighbor. "You are a shame to the Gestapo, Kellerman." Brother Stolz was praying again. "I thank thee, Lord," he said, thinking mostly of his family. At the same time he was frightened. More pain was now ahead of him, but he had also made up his mind. People like Kellerman had to be stopped. Someday, somehow, he had to fight to get his country back from people like him. Chapter 23. On the 1st of June, Alex moved into a little apartment on 7th East in Salt Lake. It had been nice to have Mom fuss over him and wash his clothes, but he felt the need to take his life into his own hands, and everything had changed now. Al Rosen had finally gotten a contract, and the plant had airplane parts to produce. Alex was busy getting the operation underway. He had always been one to carry out his job, whatever it was, and putting in 16 or 18 hours a day and sometimes staying at the plant all night didn't really bother him. At least the work took all his time and concentration. Alex rarely saw the family except at Sunday dinner, which he always went home for. He and Wally finally had something to talk about. The government had announced by then that the first ever peacetime draft would take place in the fall. A lottery would only select a few men in the first round, but the army, manned by fewer than 200,000 troops, would bulge to well over 1 million by the fall of 1941. Both Alex and Wally knew that the chances were strong that at least one of them would be taken, sooner or later. Wally was thinking, after putting the decision off for a year, that he might go ahead and sign up with the Navy after all. One spring night on the dance floor, Lorraine had whispered, "Wally, I wish I didn't love you. I should have broken up with you before I felt this way." The word sent chills down Wally's sides, and he had been blissfully happy for a few days. But it didn't take long to realize that she had meant exactly what she had said. She did wish she didn't love him, and she began to do more to distance herself. Wally was devastated. He had never studied enough for his classes, but in his discouragement he virtually quit trying. He showed up for his finals and passed all but one, but barely, and in truth he didn't ever want to go back to school. The military was looking like his only option. Bobby was spending her weekend nights alone, usually reading and preferring to be in her bedroom rather than sitting with her parents, whose disappointment was so obvious. She did see Phil on campus fairly often. He seemed to feel a mixture of pity and animosity toward her, but outwardly he was friendly. He didn't say anything about Eileen, the girl he was dating, but everyone else reported the latest to Bobby all the time. Rumor had it that Phil was already getting serious. One morning, when Bobby was in the liberal arts building, she saw David in the hall. He seemed solemn, maybe upset. "If you have a minute, I would like to talk to you," he said. "Sure," Bobby said, and the two walked to his office. Bobby was self-conscious about people seeing them together, but she was curious what might be wrong. When they reached the office, he twisted his desk chair around and dropped into it. "I'm leaving," he said. He pushed a lock of hair off his forehead. "Leaving? When?" "After finals, as soon as I can get ready." "Where are you going?" Bobby sat on the chair by the door. "I've been offered an assistant professorship at the University of Chicago." "But I thought you were staying here a few years." "That's what I planned, but this came up. It's a good opportunity for me, and it seemed for the best. I don't want to see you anymore. It just makes life difficult for both of us." Bobby understood that, of course, but David was the one person who understood why she had given Phil's ring back, and he knew how sad she was about giving up English as her major. She had tried to make amends with her father by agreeing to go to nursing school in the fall. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked. "I don't know. I applied a while back, but I didn't think anything would come of it." "Do you like the idea of living in Chicago?" "I think so. Why not? I'm sick of this place." He sounded lifeless. He was staring off across the room, looking at nothing. Bobby saw that it really was the end, and she began to cry. "I should have stopped all this before it happened." "Oh, Bobby," David said, "sometimes things happen spontaneously, and when they do, people ought to enjoy the gift. But you won't leave any room for that." "I'm sorry, I know. Let's not go over all this again. I don't want to see you before I go. I'm angry right now, and I want to stay angry until I catch a train heading east." Bobby stood up. "Okay," she said, but the tears were flowing hard now. She felt in her skirt pocket for a handkerchief and found nothing. "I do hope everything turns out well for you." She turned toward the door. "Bobby, wait." He stood up. "I'm sorry. I'm being ridiculous. Let's just say goodbye and—" He was walking toward her. "I don't know. Chalk it up to experience." He was close to her, but he didn't touch her. She whispered goodbye and turned to leave. But in that instant, she seemed to be turning away from the last glimmer of light in her life. She stopped and turned back, touched his face. He pulled her to him and held her in his arms. "Bobby, how can we hurt each other this much? Come to Chicago with me. Marry me. Let's not think of all the reasons it wouldn't work. Let's just make it work." She knew it was what she wanted, The other way, him gone and her in nursing school, seemed an impossible alternative. Bobby, you know what you're feeling. Don't throw it away. Will you marry me? I don't know, but you'll consider it? Yes. He took hold of her shoulders and pushed her away enough so he could look at her. Don't think too much. Don't be wise. I want this too, David, but I do have to think. Bobby, listen. There's plenty in Mormonism I admire. I could do all right with it. I could even join if that would make things better with your family. Bobby smiled. She wondered whether he had any idea what he would be getting himself into. Bobby, neither one of us can be happy without each other. We can't turn our backs on that. Bobby felt that was true, that she would never find anyone else like him. You need to make your decision right away. I'm going to leave in a couple of weeks. I want you to go. I want some time alone. You get established in Chicago, and then, Bobby, don't do to me what you did to Phil. He cupped his hand under her chin and lifted it. I can't be that patient. All right, but you have to give me some time, more than 2 weeks. Okay. He tried to kiss her, but she said, No, David, I can't. I want you too much. She walked out and shut the door between them. Chapter 24. Wally drove to his dad's dealership. He found President Thomas sitting at his desk, processing paperwork as usual. Dad, can I talk to you for a minute? He asked. Sure, his dad said. He looked concerned, as though he expected something to be wrong. I just got back from talking to a military recruiter. The way I see it, war is coming, whether we like it or not, and it might be better for me to go in now and get a jump on the guys who'll join up later on. He had wanted to sound logical and careful, but he had blurted the whole thing out as though the idea were nothing more than an impulse. His dad's eyes widened, and for several seconds he stared at Wally. Then he shook his head. No, he said. You've got better things to do with your life than pack a rifle around. That's just it, Dad. I'm going into the Air Corps. I'll be working on airplanes, maybe even flying them. I know I'm not really applying myself in college, but this will give me a chance to find out what I want to do. Wally, don't shovel that stuff at me. What you want is to get away from home. Nothing good would come of that. Dad, I don't need permission. I'm old enough to sign. Don't talk to me about being old enough to sign. The last I checked, I'm still your father. Wally was standing in front of his father's desk, feeling like a little kid in front of the principal. Dad, he said, I'm going. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. Wally, I offered you a chance to become a partner in my business, so don't talk to me about opportunities. You already let your biggest one pass you by. Wally was finding strength. Dad, I know what you think of me, and I'm going to prove you wrong. I've settled on something I want to do. Now let's see whether I can do it. Dad looked at Wally for a long time, and then, to Wally's surprise, he said, All right, good. You join the Air Corps. It's time you start taking responsibility for your own actions. Dad, I promise you right here, right now, I'm going to do some big things with my life. This is just the first step. Wally, you told me once that your plan was to be the family quitter. Once you join the service, quitting is not one of the options. Let's see how you do when you can't quit. Fine. I'll come back here in my officer's uniform someday, and I'll show you what I've done. Wally walked out. He felt strong for about 5 minutes, but then fear of his new reality began to set in. He decided to drive to Lorraine's house. The truth was, Wally had only reached his decision after Lorraine had told him she wanted to break up. Somewhere in his brain was lodged the hope that now, once she knew he was leaving, that she would ask him to stay. When Lorraine showed up at her front door, she looked annoyed. Could we talk for a minute? Wally asked. No, Wally, we've talked enough. Just let me tell you something, then I'll go. Okay, tell me. Wally felt sick. He saw the firmness in her face. Just come out on the porch for a minute. She pushed against the screen door, which stuck for a moment and then sprang open. As she stepped out, Wally could see that she was wearing a pretty dress, light blue, with white polka dots. He could see her lines. Her face, her smile were pretty, but those perfect lines, and the way her skirt swung around her slender legs, had always been too much for him. She was standing stiff now, her lips pressed into a straight, thin line. Let's sit down for a minute, Wally said. He walked to the swing seat and sat down, but Lorraine continued to stand. Just say what you have to say. I came to tell you that I'm signing up for the Army Air Corps tomorrow. I talked to the recruiter and it's all set. My dad isn't standing in the way. How soon do you leave? I don't know for sure. She nodded. Well, I hope it works out well for you. Wally had been dismissed. He stood up. It's nice to know that you're all broken up about it, he said. Is that what you wanted? Wally hadn't planned to tell the truth, but he found himself saying, I guess I did. That's how stupid I am. But I should have known better. Goodbye, Lorraine. He got up and walked to the steps and then down to the sidewalk. Goodbye, Wally, she said, and her voice was muted now, all the edge gone. Wally turned and looked at her. She was standing on the porch in that pretty dress, her hair curled around her face. The setting sun was glowing gold, and the color of her skin and hair were brightened, heightened. He could hardly bear the pain that hit him. He looked at her for only a few seconds, and then he said, I love you, Lorraine. I always will. He turned quickly, but she said, Wally, and he stopped. I'm sorry, she whispered. I love you too, but it never would have worked. Tears were glistening in her eyes. She hurried inside. Wally watched as she disappeared, her blue dress hazy through the screen. As he turned away, the image was still there in his head, her standing on the porch, illuminated by the sunset, whispering, I love you too. He had the feeling that that picture would hurt him just as much in 20 or 50 years as it did right now. Wally drove home, and all the way he steeled himself to deal with the onslaught from his family. But it didn't come. No one tried to change his mind, not even Mom. He went to bed early, slept fitfully, and the next day he drove downtown, where he signed the papers. The weeks that followed were hollow for Wally, and they passed slowly. On Wally's last night at home, Mom cooked a farewell dinner. The next morning he would report to Fort Douglas near the U, where he would take his final physical examination and process his paperwork. Mom prepared a big meal, like a Sunday dinner, of roast beef and mashed potatoes, corn on the cob, and a cold watermelon for dessert. Everyone laughed and joked, and Wally put on one of his shows, teasing LaRue and Beverly and making claims about visiting exotic islands with pretty dancing girls. Dad was quiet all this time, but finally, after dessert, he said, Wally, have you thought about receiving a father's blessing before you go? I hadn't thought about it, but sure, that'd be good. So everyone walked into the living room, and Wally sat on the piano bench, which Alex set in the middle of the room. Dad took a moment before he placed his hands on Wally's head. They were big, heavy hands, and Wally liked the feel of them. He shut his eyes and listened to Dad's voice fill the room. Walter Daniel Thomas, he pronounced. With the power of the holy Melchizedek priesthood, and in the name of Jesus Christ, I lay my hands upon your head to give you a father's blessing. The words came easily after that, the phrases familiar to Wally, but gradually he heard his father's voice begin to strain. I bless you with the Lord's protection, to keep you safe in war or peace, to grant you strength and resistance to disease. I promise you that if you will turn to the Lord, He will deepen your faith. Take with you the love of this family, Walter. Hold it in your heart. Dad stopped then and took some time, maybe to get his emotions under control. Walter, know this is your home, and always will be. You are part of all of us, sealed up unto eternity. I bless you, son, that you will come home to us safe and well, and full of the Spirit of the Lord. When he was finished, he lifted his hands slowly, and the room was silent. When Wally stood up and turned around, he saw tears on his dad's face. Wally nodded, unable to say anything. But then everyone came to him, and one after the other they took him in their arms. Jean did it quickly and then hurried away. LaRue and Beverly clung to him, both crying and squeezing him around the middle. Bobby sobbed, wetting his hair. Alex gave Wally a quick hug and some pats on the back, and then Mom held on to Wally and whispered a blessing of her own. Wally saw that Dad was unsure what to do, so he stepped toward him, but in the same instant he lost his nerve and merely reached his hand out. Thanks, he said. Their eyes met only briefly, but an understanding seemed to pass between them. Wally was too moved to say anything, and so he merely mumbled that he needed to pack, and he went upstairs. But for a long time he merely sat on his bed. He could no longer remember why he had wanted so badly to leave. After a while, Bobby came up and sat down next to him. Are you okay, Wally? She asked. Sure. Are you wishing you could change your mind? I don't know. I'll be all right once I get going. Well, I'm wishing I could change mine. Wally turned to look at her. What do you mean? I gave in. I told David I couldn't marry him. Why? It was just too difficult to make work. But now I miss him so much I can hardly stand it. Wally wanted to tell her about Lorraine, about all he was feeling, but he couldn't do it. Are you sure you're okay? Bobby asked again. I'm fine, Wally said. Don't worry about me. Chapter 25. Brother Stoltz was walking again. His knee gave him pain, and it probably always would, but it had healed better than his shoulder. His arm was still held with a sling. He could move his elbow and managed to use his hand, but even that caused him pain. He had returned to his teaching and went about the work patiently, but every day was exhausting, and every night was made tedious by his inability to sleep. Anna was working now. She had a gymnasium education, and she had always planned to attend a university, but everything had changed in Germany. She worked by assignment as a secretary for a company that made military uniforms. She typed letters and kept books, and she did the bidding of a sour old manager who leered at her when she walked across the room. Christmas was happy, however, no matter how difficult everything was. 2 days before Christmas, Brother Stoltz had sent Peter on his bicycle into the country, and Peter had been able to buy some fresh produce. The Stoltzes sent Peter with a few of the carrots and apples to the other families in the branch. And then, on Christmas Eve, Brother Stoltz said, "Come with me, Peter." With the help of a cane and Peter on one side of him, he had left the house. Anna had assumed that he was going to buy some little gift for the family, and had not made a fuss, even though she knew how hard it was for him to walk very far. But when he had returned 2 hours later, both Anna and her mother were greatly concerned. Father looked exhausted as he dropped onto a kitchen chair, but he was smiling. "I did something the Führer would not like, and I feel better than I have in a long time." "Oh, Heinrich, what have you done?" "Peter and I went to visit Bruder Goldfarb. It was time someone from the branch paid him a visit. We gave him 4 carrots and 2 nice apples. He cried and kissed both of us. It was wonderful. He's a man I would like to know better." Anna was proud of her father. She could see, however, that Sister Stoltz was afraid. "Please, never again," she said. But Brother Stoltz didn't promise, and his spirits were clearly raised. There was no Christmas tree this year, no candles, and Christmas dinner was simple, but the Stoltzes sang together, and they read the story of Christ's birth. Anna kept thinking of the Christmas 2 years before, when Elder Thomas and Elder Meekum had been with them, and Anna had been so young and yet so flirtatious with poor Alex. She understood how wrong she had been, but she also remembered the way he had looked at her. It was one of her favorite memories. "I wonder what Elder Thomas is doing today," Peter said. "I wish he could visit us." Brother Stoltz nodded, and Sister Stoltz said yes, that would be nice. She glanced at her daughter, gave her a tiny nod. Alex looked through the shirts and ties and stockings that Mom and Dad had gotten him, and then he watched the girls play with their new dolls. He wondered about Anna's Christmas. He watched the papers every day to see whether bombs had dropped on Frankfurt, and so far he hadn't read of any. But Berlin was being hit hard, and with the terrible German blitz on London, the British would surely retaliate against more German cities. "Have you heard anything from Wally lately?" Alex asked, just to get his mind on something else. "We finally got a letter a couple of days ago," Sister Thomas said, after about a month of not hearing anything. "He said he sent a package, and he was sorry he sent it so late. You know Wally." "How is he doing?" "All right, I think. His letter was awfully short and full of jokes, but I got the feeling he was homesick. He said he wished he could be home for Christmas." "I hope he is homesick," Alex said. "On my first Christmas away, I think I finally realized how much my home meant to me." "Sing that German Christmas song for us," LaRue said. "Stille Nacht?" "No, the other one, the happy one." "O du Fröhliche?" "Yeah, I think so." "Not right now." Alex didn't want to sing. He looked over at Bobby, who smiled and gave him a little nod, as if to say, "I think I know what you're feeling." The family had been together the night before, and Alex and Bobby had found a few minutes alone in the kitchen to talk. Alex had asked her whether she was still in touch with David. "We still write," she had said. "He's been my friend these last 2 years. I can't seem to give that up, even if it hurts. I'm going to end my pain this year, or at least ease it." "How?" "If I have to commandeer a British bomber and land in Frankfurt somehow, I'm going to talk to Anna." "And what will you say to her?" I'm going to ask her to marry me, and promise to wait for her no matter how long this stupid war lasts.